Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Susan Lopresti Wellness, Mind, Body, and Soul. This is the podcast where we explore the highs, the lows, and everything in between when it comes to a woman's life, her health, and all aspects of navigating the midlife landscape. I'm your host, Susan Lopresti, and today I have a special guest with me. Her name is Ravinder Taylor. Ravinder is not just a seasoned mind science researcher, she's a captivating storyteller with a deeply inspiring journey. From triumphing over racial bigotry in the UK to healing herself from rheumatoid arthritis. Ravinder's life has been a testament to the extraordinary power of the mind. She transitioned from a biology lab to a 30-year career in hypnotherapy, psychotherapy, and researching mental empowerment, culminating in mind training. As a dynamic speaker with extensive media experience, Ravinder makes complex neuroscience approachable and practical, sharing tools anyone can use to break free from self-limiting behaviors and live a life of greater happiness, health, and fulfillment. Thank you so much, Ravinder, for being here. I'm so excited to have you here and jump into this conversation with you.
Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for having me on. That was quite an introduction there. I think I would probably summarize it more about just to say that I constantly explore how to become the best version of myself, how to actualize all aspects of myself, so that I can experience life fully. And that's what I like to teach. So I do lean heavily on science, but the real value to all of it is just the practical applications.
Right. So, what is the science of rewiring the brain to improve success and also well-being and relationships? I'm very curious about that.
That's, there's a huge subject there. Quite honestly, most people tend to think that we are just the way we are. It's our genes, it's our life experiences, and that our personalities are fixed. And that isn't true at all. The fact is, you do have the ability to choose the kind of person that you want to be. So when it comes to rewiring the brain, it's about changing those habits. It's about learning how we intake information and how that information influences everything that we do. So to get back in the driver's seat of our life, we have to learn how we take in this information and the kind of impact it has. The fact is, a trauma from your childhood, even though it's forgotten, can still play a role today. It's when you see those habits and when you learn where to look for the information that you have the ability to overcome them.
Right. But how do you get to that point where even trauma from childhood, a lot of it is suppressed and people don't even realize or it doesn't come to the surface. And so how do you figure out why am I making these choices and how can I do it differently? So it's a lot of self-awareness. Am I correct on that?
It is, but you have to go a whole lot deeper than that. You're right, with lots of these things they're either suppressed in order to protect you in some way, or you dismiss them because you don't feel that you have the right to to hold on to them, to hold on to onto the trauma, like you should have outgrown something, so you kind of dismiss some of your own experiences. What I have found in life is all of this information, all of our life experiences are stored in our subconscious mind. It is a repository of everything that we have experienced. And lots of our choices are not made carefully and thoughtfully. Brain technicians can look at your brain and actually predict what you're going to choose up to 7 seconds before you actively make that choice. They have seen activity in the subconscious mind up to 7 seconds before you say that you've made a choice. Now, this information, as I said, it's all in the subconscious mind. And I have found that the more you trust the process, the more you understand that the information is coming from the subconscious mind, the more you question your own subconscious mind, the more the answers will appear. Now, at first, when you look at a particular situations, like why do I always choose the wrong partner, or why do I always fail at getting that promotion at work? When you look back in the past and you question your subconscious mind, sometimes you're going to get some crazy answers coming up, first of all. But the more you question it, the more the answers will appear. And when the right answer appears, it can it can seem magical in a way
Uh-huh.
for how problems can sometimes disappear, not always. But the subconscious mind uses strategies, to us, we perceive them as self-sabotage, self-destructive patterns. But the subconscious mind is really only trying to protect us. It doesn't want us to get hurt again. It doesn't want us to get that kind of exposure again. So, say you were embarrassed as a child doing public speaking. Well, as an adult, you do everything in your power to avoid public speaking. And to be successful in business, you always have to do some. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of how self-sabotage works. But one of the things that I cover in mind training that I found to be really useful, I used it, I've used it myself a lot ever since I discovered this information. But Erickson has these 8 stages of development.
Oh,
And
yes, I heard of Erickson. Yes.
yes, and he talks about what you're supposed to learn at these different stages. He assigns virtues to them. I don't like the idea of virtues. That sounds very sanctimonious. But when you're supposed to learn certain strategies or learn about yourself, one example of this, they looked at infants and they assessed the degree of bonding the infants had. So this is from birth up to about 1.5. They assessed the amount of bonding they had with their primary caregivers, so their
Mm-hmm.
parents, normally. And they were able to predict, based on the degree of bonding they had with their primary caregivers, as to how many friends they would have in high school and how good their relationships, their intimate relationships would be as they reach those stages. So these things do have a huge impact. And I went back and I looked at the different stages and I discovered there, it's like, oh, that's why, up into my early adulthood, I would say I was a mass of insecurities and inadequacies. You mentioned at the beginning that, when I was growing up in England, things have changed a lot now.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was growing up in England, racism was huge, absolutely huge. The area that I lived in was predominantly white. In fact, we were the only brown family in our school for a while. There, may have been one or two others,
Wow.
but racism was so strong that I had these memories of a 4-year-old boy who lived 4 doors along from me and a 6-year-old girl who lived just across the street from me. They would shout out racial slurs. It was so ingrained, and then wherever you went. And I think, what is also interesting about this is for the longest time, this wasn't something I talked about. My friends, my Indian friends, don't talk about it until you actively start pushing them on there. And
Mm-hmm.
then they can all report, oh yeah, people used to throw stones at us, people would spit at us, people would shout things as you walk up the street. These can be total strangers. But can you imagine being in an environment where at any point when you're out of the house, someone is going to shout something at you to a young girl?
Yeah, that's
That
true.
that was huge. That was huge. So of course I always felt insecure and inadequate. I didn't feel as good as, the mentality back then was the British way is the right way. It was the stiff upper lip. There was only one correct way. Today it has changed, and we're very aware that different cultures have different ways of doing things. I came up with a saying for myself that helped me was there isn't such thing as right and wrong, there's only differences. Now, I was talking about cultural norms, things that are considered the correct thing to do or
Mhm.
the incorrect thing to do. And it's like, no, they're just different. There's going to be some people who cover their heads when they go into their place of worship. There's going to be other people who will uncover their heads. They're both signs of respect.
Right.
They're just different. But looking at Erickson's 8 stages of development, I could look at that and say, oh, that's where it came from. And I don't need to hold on to it.
Mhm.
Especially when I look at a 4-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl shouting something at me,
Yeah,
it means nothing today. But sometimes you have to recognize these things in order for them to lose their power.
absolutely. I want to ask you about emotional intelligence because I hear that term a lot. Can you define what that is?
Emotional intelligence is how clued into your own emotions that you are. We do so many things instinctively, and we do things because we think it's the correct thing to do. I started this interview off with talking about the purpose of my work is about discovering who I am.
Mhm.
Emotional intelligence is going to be getting in tune with myself and throwing out these ideas of shoulds and oughts and have to and all the ideas that society and our enculturation can put onto us. It's about expressing myself without having all of these restrictions on them, and it's very freeing once
Oh,
you realize who you are.
but how do you get there? What are the tools and methods to get to emotional intelligence?
It's a process. It's a process. First of all, you have to understand that you have a whole lot more power than you think. You are not only a product of your genes and your upbringing and your experience. As I said, you can choose to create the person that you want to be. So if you've got an attribute in yourself that you don't really like, then
Mhm.
stop and think about where it came from and stop and think about what you can do about it. Mind training is full of tools. It's a very science-based process. But at the end of each chapter in mind training, I will have a summary to tell you why that information is important. And then I actually give you techniques to start putting things into practice. It's not about having a deep education into neuroscience or neuropsychology. You don't have to do all of that. It's about an analogy that I like to use that really simplifies it all. When I was younger, when you have a car, you open up the hood of the car, you see the engine.
Mhm.
Today, with the newer cars, you don't see that. They frequently have this big black cover over it, and they'll give you hot points. This is where you change the oil. This is where you can jumpstart your car. They just have the hot points. Mind training shows you the hot points to your brain to increase happiness. Simply smiling. I thought this was incredible when I first encountered it, but I heard these reports that simply putting a pencil between your teeth will cause your brain to produce endorphin, which is one of the happy brain chemicals. And it sounded crazy to me, but I dug deeper into it and yep, that is absolutely correct. But there are lots of ways that it's a two-way street. So
Mhm.
it's not just a case of I'm happy, therefore I smile. You can smile and make yourself happier. If you're feeling grumpy, step outside and feel the sun.
Right.
That will help produce serotonin. Stop and experience awe. You can always find something. I mean, there are lots of things in life that are simply awesome. I step outside, I hear the birds singing. that feeling will translate. So I can take charge of it. If I'm in a bad mood, there are lots of things that I can do to actively change that. And there you come back again to the emotional intelligence. It's about learning how to tweak these things in order to get the kind of result that you want, to become the person that you want.
So you really need to be very self-aware of your thoughts and your feelings and come to terms with if that's the way you want to live the rest of your life or you want a better life. And then you have lots of tools. What is neuroplasticity?
Neuroplasticity is the ability to learn.
Okay.
Lots of ideas get fixed. When we're young, we learn easily. Everything we just take on board. But as we get older, those all of those teachings get whittled down to the important things. And those highways in the brain just become stronger and stronger because we have certain habituated ways of thinking. Neuroplasticity is about taking opportunities to expand your horizons, to look further, to think outside the box, and to actively make changes with that. So say you are naturally a pessimistic person. Maybe that is to do with your genes. Maybe it's to do with, you were taught as a kid, don't expect anything good and then you won't be disappointed, and you always want to plan for the worst. Who knows where the ideas originally come from? It's going to be different for everybody. But there are such huge benefits to being optimistic. So with neuroplasticity, you can choose, you can say, okay, I am naturally a pessimistic kind of person, but I wish to change it. And I know that I can because there's all of this evidence out there. There's plenty of evidence, and mind training goes through all of that. So first of all, you have to make the choice that you want to change. And when you look at the benefits of being optimistic, optimistic people have much lower risk of dying from diseases like cancer or even infection. I mean, there's a 52% lower risk of dying from infection if you're an optimist rather than a pessimist. And that's pretty huge.
Yeah.
Research that intrigued me out of Johns Hopkins says that even if there is a family history of cardiac disease, if you are an optimistic person, you are a third less likely to express that, to
Wow.
actually have that. So when you have those incentives, then you say, okay, well, how can I change that? How can I become more optimistic? Well, first of all, you become aware of your thoughts. You find yourself saying something negative, don't just go down that avenue. You don't see it right away. It takes practice, but paying attention to your thoughts, you catch yourself going down a negative stream. You can actively change that to focus on the positive areas in your life. We all have something positive.
Yes.
You can say that, well, I'm expecting this awful thing to happen, so I have to be prepared for it. So I have to plan, and everything's going to be awful. And instead, you can say, what if that awful thing doesn't happen? What would it look like? What are the chances of that awful thing happening? What does my past experience really say? Because the fact is, even for, the really pessimistic person, most of the time it doesn't come true. My attitude towards that is, if something bad is going to happen in the future, I'll deal with it when it comes along. Why spend the time now being all concerned, being all anxious about it, if the likelihood is so high that it isn't going to happen anyway? So
I,
you can teach yourself to
right.
think differently. But as you said, first of all, you have to be aware. You have to pay attention to your thoughts, become mindful of them, and then choose to be more optimistic. Perhaps keep a gratitude journal. That is an excellent way they actually found, there was research that they did with young people who had general anxiety disorder, and they found that if they simply visualized a positive outcome, then that anxiety reduced. They looked at some older people too. They looked at the people that were more optimistic. They actually experienced fewer stressful events in the future. It wasn't that things changed, it was more how they interpreted the events that were going on in their lives. And they realized that, whereas before they may have described 10 of the events as being stressful, now they were only describing 2 of them as being stressful because they realized the others didn't matter.
Wow. So negative thinking, is that from your unconscious mind, or how do you get to that and know what you're thinking unconsciously, if
We
that
have a
makes sense?
Yeah, it's hard to know what you think consciously, but I do totally get you, Susan. We have a negativity bias. And if you stop and think about it, that makes sense. If you are not alert to danger, then that rustle in the grass, if it's a snake that's going to come bite you, well, that could kill you.
Yeah,
So therefore, you have to be alert to the negative. And we are herd animals. It's we thrive as a community, and to be ostracized by the community or ostracized by your loved ones, that's really hard. So that's why when your partner says something negative to you, if they hurt your feelings, they upset you, it's going to take at least 5 positives to counteract that one negative. This was work that John Gottman did. This is out of the University of Washington. He found that if he listened to couples talking to each other, just for like half an hour, just normal conversation, he could predict if that couple would last or if their relationship would fall apart just by how they spoke to each other. And it is based on this kind of ratio of you need at least 5 positives for every negative. And they found the same kind of thing in business environments too. If your boss gives you a review and he tells you 9 good things and 1 bad thing, you're going to fixate on that 1 bad thing.
absolutely.
That is what is going to turn on. Now, you could go just with positive affirmations, but the problem with positive affirmations is that deep inner part of you, that your subconscious mind holds all of your experiences, and it holds more strongly to the negative experiences. So when you say something positive to yourself, even something like I am good, can be really common for that inner talk to come back and say, well, what does good mean? I'm
Right.
not really good because I was kind of impatient with my partner this morning, or I got annoyed with a dog today and I shouted at her, and it's not her fault, she's just being a dog, you know. So what does good mean? You have this self-talk that comes back out. So you can use positive affirmations, but a more powerful way to do it is using subliminal self-help programs. Now, this becomes a really tricky kind of field because there isn't a strict definition of what subliminal even is. There are lots of companies out there. They can tell you all of these wonderful things that you can achieve just by using their program. Everything is going to magically change for you. It doesn't work that way. This was created by my husband, Eldon Taylor. He's the creator of the Inner Talk Subliminal Self-Help Programs. It's the only such technology in the marketplace that has been researched by independent universities and institutions and been demonstrated effective. How you talk to yourself. It primes your self-talk. So when you come across an area that you say, I'm always bad at, so say that you're trying to find a new partner and everywhere you look, everyone seems awful. They don't seem suitable for you. And then you start thinking that there aren't good potential partners out there. That kind of self-talk is going to block you from seeing the person that is good there.
Right.
It actively blocks you from seeing that. It's a bit like when you're buying a car and you finally decide on the car that you want, then all of a sudden you see that make and model everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah. So your expectations. So with the subconscious mind is a repository of your experiences. It holds on to the negative experiences, and this gets reflected in how you talk to yourself. So every time you tell yourself, I can't do something, you're
Right.
never going to try your best to do it. With the inner talk subliminal programs, an analogy here that might make better sense for you, because lots of people say, well, how can something that you can't hear change how you feel? But imagine yourself in a party, lots of conversations going on, you're deep in your own conversation, and then someone in a different, a different part of the room mentions your name
Yeah.
or mentions the name of your partner or your children. Your ears prick up.
Yeah.
So your subconscious mind is paying attention to a whole lot more
Oh,
than you really believe. Another example that will show the effect really well is, have you ever been out in the store, say in the mall or whatever, and you start humming to yourself only to realize that the tune that you're humming to yourself is what is playing on the music system in the background? You just weren't aware of it, but it primes it. Well, with
right.
a correctly created subliminal program, although you're not hearing the words consciously, they are there. It's, with our programs, it's more an audio illusion.
Right.
So it's it's embedded in the soundtrack. You're just not aware of it because the soundtrack distracts you. But you end up repeating that to yourself. And because it's going in, it's bypassing the subconscious centuries that tell you, I can't do it. And instead, it replaces it, primes it from the inside out. You play one of these programs, say for depression. I call our depression program a being cheerful program.
Mhm.
When you're feeling bad, now I'm not talking about clinical depression, although our depression program was found to be effective when used in conjunction with therapy for people who were actually diagnosed clinically depressed. To me, I'm talking more about our normal day-to-day experience. There are days that you just feel bad.
Yeah. Yes.
And if you stop and catch yourself, you'll realize that on those days, that inner talk, that self-talk, that nonstop chatter that we have with ourselves, it's going along the lines of, this sucks. I can't wait for this to be over. I'm tired. I'm fed up. People don't like me, whatever it may be. I'm having a bad day. But when you use our program up for depression, it will replace that talk to, this is fun. I enjoy life. I can do this. Now stop and think about it, Susan. Do you think it's possible to be depressed when that inner chatter, that conversation that's coming from deep within you says, I can do this. I've got this. Life is good. I'm capable. People like me. You can't be depressed at the same time.
Right.
So that's pretty much how this works with all that negativity. When you find an area in your life that you want to change, now you have to be very specific. You can't just be positive about everything in the world.
Right.
When you're dealing with personal development, self-help, we normally have particular areas. So if you're trying to lose weight,
Mm-hmm.
that self-talk that comes maybe from your childhood, when every time you were upset, mom bought you ice cream.
Right.
And so you have programmed within you, I'm upset, I need to assuage that anxiety with ice cream. Well, if you've got an outward goal that says, I want to lose weight, that kind of sabotages it. So
Absolutely.
we can have programs that will say, I enjoy healthy foods. So many people who have used our weight loss program, they can call us with testimonials and they say things like, I went to the fridge to get a piece of chocolate cake, but then I closed the door because I realized I really wasn't hungry after all. Or they say, the apple just looked more appetizing to me. We have affirmations on the programs that say, I like fruits.
So tell me more about your company, the programs, and how my listeners could find you.
The company is Progressive Awareness Research. We've been in business for close to 40 years now. I'm losing track a little bit. I think we're coming up to 40 years now. We have the Inner Talk subliminal self-help programs that my husband, Eldon Taylor, created. You can find more about us. You can do a search for progressive awareness, and then you go into the science behind it. But if you just go to innertalk.com, that will tell you all about the technology, how it works, how you can bypass the negativity that's already in your subconscious mind. And then we do offer about 500 different titles for all different areas. So whatever you want to improve in your life. So just go to innertalk.com. There's a banner that's high up on the page there that says the Inner Talk store. You can go and just anything that you want to improve, just put that in the search box.
And you just download the audios to your phone or your laptop?
You can download them. Yep, download them, have them on your computer, keep a backup of them. But yeah, you can download them, play them anytime you like. I'm frequently playing them. I've often got them playing on my phone. I'll have the ocean track. I don't use headphones because, when I'm working, headphones don't work for me anyway. I just don't like headphones. I find them uncomfortable. So I just have it broadcasting on my phone, but I play it very quietly. As long as I can hear the primary track, which is either the music or nature, then I'm going to get the benefit of the subliminal affirmations. I can play it so quietly that you have to be within 5 feet of me, even to be aware that there's anything. It'll just be the sound of the ocean. So it doesn't have to be loud, but I am playing them almost all the time. We live in a world where there is so much negativity out there that if there's not something I'm actively working on, if I haven't discovered anxiety in a particular area, or if there's not something special that I'm working on, then I'll be playing something else just to keep my positivity topped up. So I frequently will play quantum younging because I don't want the mindset out there that says you're getting older, you have to take it slower, you have to do this. Being older means that you slow down and your mind stopped working. So I don't want those ideas in my head because they can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I frequently will play quantum younging. I've always got programs playing, just pretty constantly. Different areas, different times. I'm not the tidiest of people, so I play our decluttering program.
Wow.
Everyone comments on, my desk used to be piled up. Whatever was the most urgent was on the top of my desk. That I knew where things were, but it just wasn't neat and organized. Since we created the decluttering program, that's a pretty recent program of ours. My husband and I both, when we created the program, we found ourselves automatically tidying up around us. And I can't tell you the number of habits of mine that have changed. I used to be the kind of person that would always leave drawers slightly open, cupboards slightly open. I look back in the kitchen and say, what the heck? Why is everything open? Not today. Now I will straighten things. I will straighten the towel on the towel rack. I'm just constantly finding ways to make the environment look nicer so that it's more peaceful. And when it's more peaceful, your creativity is free to go.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, it's night and day.
I love that. I love that. Yes, I find that too. I'm a neat freak, so I like everything in its place. And when things are not, if I walk into a room and I have stuff on the bed or what, It's an overwhelming feeling, and so right away I have to clean up. I just love everything being in order. I feel like I'm calmer, more serene, and it just feels good to be in a house that is neat and tidy versus, where it looks like a tornado swept through it. Do
You're
you have
fortunate,
any
Susan.
final thoughts
Yeah,
to leave my listeners with?
I do want to say, yeah, actually, just from your last comment, you are fortunate that you are naturally neat and tidy. Lots of people aren't. Once again, it can be
Right.
your genes, your upbringing, whatever it is. And then that's when you want to change that self-talk. And that's what worked for me. The final thing that I would like to say is you can choose the person you want to be. The tools are out there around the world. People are researching how your mind works and how to get you to buy their products, vote for them. They're constantly trying to manipulate your thoughts. The algorithms on Facebook is a
Yes.
classic example. We can take the same scientific research out there and use it to improve our lives. We have the ability to get back in the driver's seat of our lives. Why leave this information to those people who want to use it against us? Mind training is about taking this information and finding ways that we can empower ourselves.
I love it. I love it. I'm definitely going to look into the company and go through all the categories and see what it is that I could use to help me. So I appreciate this so much, Ravinder, for coming on and all of your knowledge. It's been a very great experience to learn all about this with you, and I appreciate your time coming on.
Thanks so much for having me on, Susan. I've
You're
enjoyed
welcome.
speaking
I
with
will
you.
put all of your information in the show notes. And also, I'm sure you're on social media as well. Yeah,
Mhm.
so I'll put all of that in the show notes. And again, I would love to have you come back again sometime. We'll talk. There's so many things to talk about. So it would be a pleasure to have you back again.
Anytime, Susan. I'd love it. Thank you.
Okay. Have a good rest of your day.